Hi and welcome to episode 1 of Tackling Tournaments. My name's Mike. I'm from Objective Secured in Perth, Western Australia, and together with my wife Emma, we run some of the biggest events held here in Australia for Warhammer 40,000. This series is about talking about some of the questions we get asked as tournament organisers and how we handle and approach those questions so that you can learn what we might expect if you came to one of our events and hopefully can provide that input to your own TOs in the event that you have questions for them. Today's topic is actually about modelling for advantage, WYSIWYG, and using old models. One of the biggest things that we've seen Games Workshop do over the last 30 years of Warhammer 40,000 is update models. Sometimes they don't do it as often as we would like. I'm still using the same warp spot as I've been using since 1994. But most recently we saw the Eldar avatar updated, and he provides a perfect example for what we could potentially have a conversation with a player about who wants to come to a tournament using this model. The Eldar avatar in its original form came on a 25mm base and was roughly the size of a modern day Wraithguard. He's not very big, and we've actually got a size comparison shot of him here. As you can see, this model is in no way, shape or form suitable to be used in a modern game of Warhammer 40,000 as the Eldar avatar of Khaine. I would argue that on an appropriate 32mm base, I'd be okay with the old avatar being used as a modern Autarch, a basic Autarch with a Starglaive and no upgrades, perhaps using the relic armor for -1 damage and a 2+ save to make him a little bit more avatar-like. He certainly doesn't deserve to be the God of War with toughness 8 and 14 wounds. Moving on, past Rogue Trader, we hit 1994, and we see the second edition relaunch of the Eldar avatar, which is the same model that has been available up until only a few months ago in 2022. The model itself is 20+ years old now. As you can see, it originally came on a 40mm square base, and over the years that base size has changed a little bit. At one point it came on a 60mm round, and then most recently a 40mm round. This is the model that most, I suspect, Eldar players will have in their collection at some point in time or another. Moving on from here, we also had in present circulation the Forge World avatar of Khaine. There were two versions of this model, one with a sword and one with a spear. Both models came on a 60mm round base. As you can see from the size comparison shot, the 60mm base being upgraded to an 80mm base to match the existing Eldar avatar would see the Forge World model completely acceptable for use in modern 40k. The two avatars are virtually identical in size in terms of height, in terms of their silhouettes. Both still have spear points raised, hands raised, big hair. I don't think anyone could actually complain if you were to put a Forge World avatar onto the correct size base at 80mm and use him as an existing avatar of Khaine. I feel like that's a completely appropriate and acceptable thing to do. Just update the base and he'd be good to go. Unfortunately, these models have been discontinued in part or in full for quite some time now, which means that there will probably be a lot of players who don't have access to the Forge World models, but do have access to the original 1994 sculpt that is currently available, or was until recently currently available, in Finecast. Could you use that older model to represent the new avatar of Khaine? My initial thought, and I'm sure that most people would be similar in this thought process, would be definitely not. He's too small, the base size is all wrong, and putting such a small model on an 80mm base would look a bit ridiculous. I think that it's important to recognise the fact that some players may prefer the old model, some players may not necessarily have the funds to upgrade straight away to their newer model and still want to play with their friends. And obviously with friends it's completely fine as long as you all agree on the terms of using that older model. But coming to a tournament, unfortunately, I don't think as a TO I could in good conscience allow you to use the old avatar model even on the correct size base. There's just too many differences in the silhouette, there's too many differences in the scale and the size. But then the question becomes, is there a way we could make it the right way? And I think the answer to that question lies in how you treat and model the base. And I think there's a few different ways you could tackle this. You could certainly build the base up to maybe a set of stairs or some sort of crash or ruin, or even a rocky outcropping to lift the standard model up to the appropriate height. Now, you'd have to essentially double the height of the miniature, and you've got plenty of 80mm base to do that with, so I don't think that's a huge concern. I think you'd also have to make sure that whatever you built would be roughly the equivalent in width, and when you look at the modern Avatar and the Forge World Avatar, they're kind of a 60mm cylinder that mostly fills a 60mm base, and that 80mm for the new modern one kind of gives him a little bit more framework to sit within. So I think whatever you use to generate the height would also have to be quite bulky and fill the space pretty well. Once you get him to the right height and you fill that space with his base to the appropriate space, I think using something like the Cauldron of Blood from Age of Sigmar, the Daughters of Cain range, could be a great way of creating a very Eldar-esque stairway up to the statue of Cain at the top. I think that once you kind of work through it and theme it to match your army, it could still look really effective. I also think that when you get to the table, assuming that you create something suitable for a TO to approve in terms of size and shape to mount your older metal avatar onto, you'd also have to be quite open to your opponent being a little bit on the liberal side when it comes to line of sight. Obviously, they'd have to be able to draw line of sight to any part of the avatar model itself, but also to any part of the base, right down to, but not including the actual flat base itself. So I think that when there's questions around it, that's something you should take into account when building it, to make sure that what you put on the table from an opponent's point of view is roughly 50 to 60 mils in every direction, so it takes up the majority of the base and obviously brings the avatar up to the right height. And then when you are at the table, make sure that you show your opponent the model, explain you've had it cleared by the tournament organizer, and then say to them that line of sight is drawn to any part of the entire model and its base. I feel like if you go through that process, however you choose to resolve that, most opponents should be completely fine, and the game should proceed like any other game. Now, there will be TOs out there who just outright say, no, you can't use the old model of the avatar. And that's obviously up to them. That's part of their decision-making process when organising their own events. I would encourage those TOs to consider the possibility that someone might have spent a lot of time and effort on a model that they're really proud of and they want to continue using, and maybe don't want to update their existing model just for the sake of spending more money. And encourage those TOs to work with their players to make sure that those older models can still be utilised in some fashion. Another great example of this is Be'lakor. Up until recently, the Be'lakor model came on a 40mm square, followed by a 40mm round, and then I believe a 60mm round base, and he's roughly the size of a Demon Prince, a standard plastic Demon Prince. We then got the new model, and the new model is considerably larger. He's got quite a big, amazing scenic base. The base size went up to, I believe, a 100mm round. He has huge wings, a massive sword, and the whole body just got bigger. Could you then use the old Be'lakor as the new one? I would argue that even with the parameters I've suggested for the avatar, no. Unfortunately, the old Be'lakor just doesn't have the table presence required. The amount of conversion work would be massive and extensive. You'd almost be having to create a cloak of shadows around him to generate the silhouette that his wings have. And while I'm sure there are some very talented hobbyists out there that could do that, I don't know that it's something that the average hobbyist could pull off in a manner that would be visually appealing and not be seen as a little bit of a joke when asked for by the TO. So I feel like the old Be'lakor model ends up being relegated to a Demon Prince or maybe an Exalted Champion with a jump pack or something similar in terms of a more traditional demon rather than the first Demon Prince of Chaos. Much like the original Avatar of Cain in that regard. So, when you do have a question around using an old model, the first thing a player should do, speak to your TO. Ask the TO what their stance would be and what their expectations would be. TOs, I would encourage you not to just say no and that you must use the most current model, and work with your players so that you're not policing their hobby any more than you have to. As TOs, I believe we have a responsibility to obviously make sure that the playing field is as even as possible, but also make sure that everyone's having fun. And sometimes that fun means I get to use models that are older than my opponent. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's a consistent methodology of allowing players to do that. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask us as TOs for events that we've run or events we've attended, please feel free to list them in the comments below, or you can shoot us an email or contact us via our social media. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit like and subscribe down the bottom. And until next time, we'll speak to you soon. Thanks.